All right, welcome back to the Homeschool Dad's podcast. Today we're doing another camp edition. So we're in West Virginia, and I've got a special guest, Aaron Vorel. He is an engineer. He's got 4 kids, been homeschooling for about 12 years. And last month, this guy was in Germany. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and talk to all the dads watching or listening. Every homeschool family has kind of their own philosophy. And there's a bunch of flavors of homeschool. There's Montessori style, there's like classical, there's just taking the public school and doing it at home. There's sitting your kid in front of a computer and doing virtual school all day. Like there's all different flavors. How would you describe the Vorel family homeschool flavor?
So we are very much classically oriented.
Okay.
So we didn't necessarily start out that way.
Well, real quick, just in case somebody who's watching who's like just brand new and they hear classical, what does that mean? What is classical? What is that approach?
So classical, and my wife could explain the details on this much better than I, but because she's done a lot more research on this subject, but it really kind of focuses on development of the person. And, you cover a lot of your core subjects, but it also emphasizes an understanding of history to kind of understand and give a context to some of the other subjects. And then as we're going along with it, we also try to connect this back to God and understanding his creation, if it's science or math, understanding his nature through history and how that is exemplified or not exemplified. So we follow that approach. And then in terms of the method of teaching, there's very much a content that you're trying to impart to the student, but you're also trying to do this in a way that you lead them to it somewhat along the way as well. So it's kind of a mixture of telling, but then also prompting them with questions to lead them to some of the conclusions as well. So it kind of incorporates a bit of the Socratic method with that as well.
And Socratic methods is
asking questions to kind of draw it out. So it's not entirely that, but you do incorporate that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So sorry to interrupt you. I just want to give kind of a framework for what classical might mean. You were saying you didn't start out that way.
Yeah. So initially our motivation for homeschooling was more that, our children were 4 or 5 years old, getting to the age of doing preschool, kindergarten, those kinds of things. And it didn't seem right to go send them away for the whole day for us. So it wasn't that we were scared of something there, but we still felt like we had a primary influence or needed to be a primary influence there, especially at those ages. So that was the initial impetus was, okay, we're both fully equipped to educate in these areas too. I'm more of a math science guy. I'm an engineer. My wife is more of a English and history oriented. So she has degrees in English. So between the two of us, we felt like we were equipped to go down that path. Initially it was just that, hey, they're little. It doesn't make sense to just have them under somebody else's care, to us at least, for the whole day. So that was kind of the initial motivation, but then we quickly kind of pivoted because, like I said, it wasn't that we were scared of something or that we were trying to I don't want to put them out in the world. I'm scared of the world. It was because we also both agreed very strongly that education needed to have a goal. It wasn't going to be sufficient to run away from something and protect them from societal influences, so to speak. We had to have educational objectives, because I've certainly seen some examples with homeschool families where that's the primary motivation.
Fear.
Correct.
Yeah.
And as a result, there isn't really strong education in some cases, not all, but in some. And so if your only motivation is just to protect them from societal or worldly influences in that way, then the question becomes, well, what are you trying to impart instead of that? And so that can create a vacuum if that goal isn't clear of what you're running towards. So we were determined to have clear goals for the children's education. So that meant covering certain subjects. It meant making sure that they had background in certain foundational subjects. In that way, when we think about what we call extracurriculars, which could be sports or music or all these other kinds of things, our goal was always been just to expose them to certain things so that they can learn to achieve some level of proficiency. And then maybe it's something that they build on through the rest of their life. Maybe it's not. But, in the case of sports, if they want to participate in some recreational sports as an adult, they're equipped to do so. They're not going to be professional athletes.
They're going to contribute
pretty
to the
sure,
team.
but they can participate. They don't have to feel left out. They've got a little bit of skills, and that also can then lead to fitness and all those other good things too. But just to use physical sports as an example, that was kind of our objective with that, is prepare them, to have a healthy lifestyle and enable them to participate in recreational activities if they desire to do so as an adult.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that maybe the first time I've heard it stated that way, or what I was hearing you say was, it's not good enough to run away from something. You have to run towards something.
Mm-hmm.
That is so important. I think every dad watching this, particularly for the dads who they didn't come to the table saying, sweetheart, we need to homeschool our kids. If their wives were like, I think we should homeschool our kids, and the dad was like, what? That's weird, I guess. And they kind of just like,
yeah.
I don't want to use the word capitulate because it sounds negative. I don't mean it that way, but like it wasn't their heart. They're like, yeah, I guess we can do that. I think they're the most at risk for the falling into that vacuum. They're running away from, yeah, you're right, school's scary, or like there's school shootings or woke agenda. That's your political flavor or whatever. Running away from that.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you running towards?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so important.
And I was less supportive initially. I wouldn't say I was unsupportive. I was okay with it at young ages, but I always kind of envisioned this was going to come to an end initially.
At some point,
they're just going to transition to school, right? Mm-hmm. And like, in my head at that time at kindergarten age, I was probably envisioning like somewhere around middle school or high school,
yeah, they
would make that transition. The way it played out for us, we were in cooperative style education. So we had 1 day a week meetings. I was able to participate in some of that. Mm-hmm. So when the kids did, I think it was around ages like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, they had a physics was done for the semester. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm strong in science, so I taught their physics class that year. Awesome. I was able to work it into my schedule to do that. So it was fun. We were able to do a lot of demonstrations in labs, and I had lasers out and all these kinds of things to do, like optics lessons. So they had fun with that. And but being able to participate a little bit was good. But then as they got to high school age, we found a hybrid school where they attend twice a week for a full day. Mm-hmm. And they get their primary instruction there, but then they're home the other 3 days of the week, or 5 days, as it were. And so only 2 days a week they're in school there. That model has worked well for us at the high school age. Mm-hmm. So they're able to get, particularly as they're getting into more advanced subjects, it's good to have some instruction from people who are experienced in explaining those subjects.
So your intuition that something was going to transition at some point was accurate to some level. Or at some point you guys had another conversation and say, well, what are we going to do here? Like, they're high school age now. Like, are we transitioning, or are you going to keep doing this?
Yeah.
Something I want to kind of double click on. You said you and your wife both felt like you were capable of teaching your kids. A lot of times when I talk to someone at the park and someone finds out that we homeschool and say, yeah, we homeschool, and either I'll hear something like, oh, well, how are your kids going to be socialized? And it's ironic because we're literally at a park playing with their kids. So it's like, well, this. But the other argument, or the other reaction I get is, oh, I would never be able to do that. And I think some of it is a fear that like a mom or a dad doesn't feel like they have the capacity or they have the skill set to teach. Mm-hmm. So you stated we felt capable. I can't remember exactly the words you used, but that was not an issue. You guys felt like, yeah, we're totally capable of doing this. Was there ever a moment that you were like, are we capable of doing that? You know what I mean? Did you ever second guess that?
No.
No.
Remind me to come back to the socialization topic later. Okay. But with respect to the capability, I think that there are two things there at least two that I've observed with people. One is just whether or not they're sure they could actually just do a good job in educating them. Mm-hmm. And I think that depends on a person's background. It also depends on the grade level that you're talking about too. And so, um, just having the wisdom to engage additional help at the right points in time, if you're not equipped to explain a particular subject as they're advancing through middle or high school in particular, then recognizing where it might be useful to get some supplemental education in that way, whether it's online videos or a private tutor or putting them like we did in some kind of hybrid school. I think that having the wisdom to recognize where your gaps are and finding ways to fill those is a good thing. The second thing I've observed is I think some people are also just uncomfortable with the idea of being with their kids full time for the first 15 or 18 years of their life.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there is a comfort in trusting someone. This comes down to personal responsibility and taking on the responsibility of educating your kids, and like for all their successes, you get to take credit, and all their failures, you have to take credit. Like they're like, that's scary. So I think you're right. But I think there is something about that, like the easier choice is to send them off and then get them back. And if something's deficient, you can complain about somebody else because it's their fault. Obviously, I think that's a terrible worldview. I don't think if you're a dad, you're watching this, or if you're a mom, you're watching this, and you find that kind of that itchiness in the back of your mind, where like, man, I wish I could just send them. I get it. I have thought that before. I man, this would be so much easier.
Yep.
And like with our kids, I joke with my wife sometimes, like it'd be a lot easier if our kids were dumb. Like they ask like seriously hard questions. They push back with like just enough logic that it's like, oh, I've got to actually back up what I'm saying. Like it would be easy for dumb kids who are just compliant. But you have smart kids and you're raising them to be capable and thinking, and they can push back. It sharpens you as a parent. Also keeps you on your A game. So sometimes I get it. Sometimes you can think it'd be so much easier if you send them to school. It'd be so much easier if they weren't so smart or so like thoughtful. It's a terrible thing to think, but
or just the reality that it can be a hassle. It can be frustrating, and it can be a lot of turmoil or activity. It can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this is where a lot of dads, and I certainly have fallen into this category too, the father needs to recognize their responsibility to help alleviate that aspect of it. Because if your wife is doing most of the educating, like I've pitched in on certain subjects, and in high school, like I helped them with their math and science in particular. But that's kind of normal. Like even if they were in public school, like
any mom and dad would probably do that.
Right. But because of like kind of connecting it back to this idea of being overwhelmed at the idea of just being with them all the time, there needs to be a break from that. Like a human being needs a little bit of break, a little time to be alone, or to pursue some of their own hobbies or interests a little bit. And this is something I acknowledged when I was 20 or 25 or 30 years old, but I wasn't initially as good at trying to prioritize. And I'm not saying I'm good at it now per se, but I think it's important for the father to be able to give his wife a break. Take the kids. They're your kids. You're not babysitting. It's kind of a pet peeve term of ours, that when the dad takes the kids and we call it babysitting. No, that's called being a father.
That's right.
So do that and give your wife a break, and then the idea of homeschooling may be a little less daunting for her from that angle.
For sure. That's a great segue. Let's go into one question I ask a lot of dads is, what are ways that as a father we can support our wives, particularly if they're doing the bulk of the educating at home? And you've already kind of talked about, taking some subjects that if you have a strength in it, like take that on. And but most dads I think would probably do that. Maybe I would encourage you, if you're a dad, do that. What are some other ways that you've found over the years that you can come in and provide support in maybe strategic ways, or ways that are, like the 80-20 principle? Like what's the thing you can do that has the most impact, if you have any suggestions like that, or really anything?
I think it connects back to what I said before of giving support, and it's there's a couple layers to this. I mean, one is like from a call it a management level, there's decisions to be made about education. Like, are we going to do a hybrid? Are we going to do a full homeschool? Are we going to do co-op? So there's what curriculum are we going to use?
Mm-hmm.
There's like management decisions that need to be made.
Sure.
Depending on the two of you and how the two of you work together, that for lack of a better term, that balance of power might be a little bit different.
I totally understand what you're saying. Like
Um,
every marriage is different. Sometimes the dad's going to be like, no, I want to make the final decision. Sometimes he's like, no, you're the one doing it. Pick the one that feels best for you and then run it by me, or don't run it by me. Tell me what you
yeah,
chose. Or there's different versions.
I would say just don't be disengaged in it. Don't just say, oh, that's for my wife to figure out.
Right.
Um,
So
even if she's
why
doing
not?
a lot of that, because, and I'm going to say something, and it sounds like I'm an expert in this, but it's far easier to say than to do. Um, if you're not engaged, even if you're taking the kids, then she feels a little less supported in that most of the time, I
Mhm.
would say. So even if you're just a sounding board for some of these management decisions, as we're kind of weighing the pros and cons of different approaches, or you're providing a little bit of direct input on certain things and giving feedback on those pros and cons, I think you got to be engaged, and that also just helps her feel like you're in there with her, even if she's doing 80% of the day-to-day educating.
Right.
You don't need to swoop in and take over necessarily,
Great point.
but be involved with it. So,
I think that's really good. I know Jen, my wife and I have talked about this before. Um, she does not want me to tell her what to do. Like she doesn't want to be told what to do. She's very capable. She's intelligent.
mhm.
She has got it, but she doesn't want to feel like she's the only one who's got it.
Right.
So exactly what you're saying is spot on. Does she want me to come in and say, hey, we're gonna? I was doing some research. I want to use this curriculum. I want to like micromanager. She absolutely would hate that. But for her to feel like I'm like whatever. I don't care. Because if you say no, you choose, babe. You do it. That's the same thing as hearing I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst thing you can do for your wife is tell her you don't care. You know, even if you really don't care. I mean, the last thing you should say is I don't care. You should be engaged because these are your kids.
And just remember, yeah, like you just said there, and remembering that you still bear some responsibility in all of
A
this.
lot of
So
responsibility. Yeah.
so okay, maybe you trust her judgment completely too. Maybe it's not that you don't care, quote
Right.
unquote, but maybe you
Right.
fully trust her judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like maybe she wants you to listen to her ideas, be a sounding board for some of the ideas, and that just helps her feel like you're not absent from the activity. So,
That's great. I know you've heard of like decision fatigue.
mm-hmm,
Like when you, if you're making her make all the
mm-hmm,
decisions, just cognitively, the weight of deciding them all. Like if she comes to you and is like, hey, I'm thinking about this, but I see some really good qualities here. I think maybe I might want to do this. It's a little more expensive. I don't like it. So there's all these things that in you, if this is your role, if that's how your power
mm-hmm,
dynamic or family, you can say, hey, don't worry about it. Let's go ahead and spend more. Let's do the one you're feeling. If you got guts going this way, let's do it. And all of a sudden she's like, okay. And if it goes south, she can be like, well, you chose it. And I'm fine taking that responsibility. You know what I
mm-hmm,
mean? So I think sometimes the decision fatigue can just be exhausting. I know Jenna has talked to me about that. Just sometimes just like just wants a break,
mm-hmm.
you know? And like you talked about. So yeah. Are there any other ways that you can think that are useful for dads to support their wives?
Mm, I would I would say if you can carve out the time to do it, occasionally get involved with a particular subject or something. You may not be able to fit it in all the time or every school year or anything like that, but being able to get involved at some points along the way and do a little bit of instruction, I
Mm-hmm.
think is a beneficial experience. So,
So you enjoyed the time you spent doing the physics class?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you feel
And
like there was any connection with your kids that was different, like before that class and after that class? Do you know what I mean? Like,
um
could you sense a difference in terms of your relationship with the kids?
I didn't really sense a shift in terms of relationship per se. Although there were times afterwards, though, where they would be covering something that was related, and then they would talk to me. Oh, this was like that lab that we did in your physics class where you were slinging the weight across the basketball gymnasium.
Yeah. Shared memories.
She's, or they might even comment like, "You explained that better than this video," or whatever it was.
That's
So,
great to hear.
it's like, yes. So, there's a couple subjects I might be able to do that in. So,
Yeah.
but it's having some involvement, though. I mean, it may not be that each moment of engagement is going to be life changing for them, but if you have a little bit of engagement, you're more likely to create some experiences that they'll remember.
Again, those shared experiences for sure.
You increase your odds of creating those if you are involved.
That's a great point.
I want to come back to the socialization topic, because this is something we have talked about quite a bit, because it's a common concern that's expressed. Oh, if you're keeping your kids at home, they're not going to know how to relate to people. Mm-hmm. I think that's garbage. I think that there are ways that can happen.
Okay.
And I think it comes back to, do you have goals or not? Are you running from something and just trying to keep them away from outside influences, or are you trying to educate your children towards specific objectives? And with respect to socialization, the way we've always, or the way that we have come to view it, I shouldn't say always, but the way that we've come to view it is the ultimate goal is to produce an adult that can relate effectively with other adults.
Okay. Hold on.
And so
the goal is to produce an adult who can relate to other adults.
Yes. And to other children, but let's just start with the adult use case. So along the way, I want them to be able to be respectful. They need to develop social skills and manners to be able to have a conversation with an adult eventually, and to be able to learn when to stop talking and listen to the other person and not interrupt, and learn how to control themselves, learn how to pay attention and not just be doing something else. Like, they need to learn these social manners in order for them to be more accepted by other people.
And these are called like the soft skills, right?
Correct. And this is what makes a person acceptable to other people, is if they're able to relate and express some concern, and they can follow some of these customs or conventions that we call manners that help facilitate human interaction. A 6-year-old doesn't have that. So I don't really care as much if my 6-year-old can relate well with other 6-year-olds.
Great point. Hold on.
They're not going to learn it there.
We got to pause there. That is such a good point, because the public school, the government school system is put all 6-year-olds together, put all 7-year-olds together, put all 8-year-olds together. And what you're saying is a 6-year-old does not have the skill set that you are wanting your 6-year-old to have.
Correct.
So to put them around
a
bunch of other 6-year-olds is they're not getting 1% better in the area you want them to get better at.
Right.
I love it. That's a great point.
So, I mean, when we did co-op style education, or when the kids are in hybrid school, they do tend to group by age out of necessity, because they're at certain levels of education. That all makes sense. But with respect to socialization, we get them involved with other adults. We expect them and we encourage them to listen to conversations among the adults when we have guests over to the house, or when we're visiting with other people, and they listen, they learn to participate. Now, that also translates then into their interactions with their peers along the way too, but more so, then it becomes more of a coaching exercise. There's a difference between modeling the behavior that you want them to adopt, which is only going to be demonstrated really by adults.
In the adult world.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the modeling should come from adults, but then as they're interacting with peers, that's more of a coaching activity. So now
what's coaching look like in that scenario?
So in that case, you're helping them deal with situations where, hey, this person was mean to me. How do you respond to this? Well, in this case, maybe just let it go. In other case, okay, well, maybe you do need to say something to them about it. Here's how you might go about that. So as they're dealing with the messiness of human interaction, then that's more of a coaching activity as they're interacting with their peers too. But I would not look to their peer group and expect their peer group, foolishly, in my opinion, to model the expected behavior for them.
Right. And if you're sending your kids to be with a group of kids that are their age for the bulk of the day, that is the thing that's going to influence. Like there's only so much. In my mind, it's kind of a math game. There's only so much time in the day, and the amount of time in the day that you're moving that 1% closer to the goal, whatever that goal is, like you have to be strategic about that. Like, hey, I want you to be around we're going to go to the bank. I want you to see how I interact with this adult teller. Like you're going to be quiet unless they say hello to you. And if they do, you need to talk to them or whatever. Like there's those. Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. I think that's really, really good point. Socialization, man. I think that's a good take on it. Okay. Since this is a camp version, it's supposed to be a shorter conversation. I did want to dig into something we were talking about earlier. You have kind of an interesting view. So we're both professing Christians. We believe in the God of the Bible. I know that the audience may not, but if this is the part you want to cut off, so be it. As we think about God, and sometimes as you read the Bible, you hear God as referred to as a father. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about what that means to you. Like, what are lessons we as dads can get from learning about how God is a father? And if I didn't set that up well, you kind of take it and run. So, because it was an interesting conversation.
So the Bible uses terms very specifically in describing God as a father to us. You can find a lot of examples of that in Hebrews chapter 2. It also then talks about how he who sanctifies, Jesus Christ, and they who are sanctified, us, are all of one, meaning we're of the same Father. And for that reason, the verse goes on to say that he's not ashamed to call them brethren. Jesus Christ is not ashamed to call us brothers and sisters because we are of the same Father, is the implication there. So there is the concept of a spiritual family. The human family was created to model this.
Okay.
And you can find this through a couple different things. In Genesis, it says that we were created in his image, right? So the other creatures of the world do not bear God's image. They don't resemble God in that way. So that was done with the intent of us being part of his family, right? It makes sense that we would look like him. In the book of Malachi, where it's talking about divorce, it says that he hates divorce because he made them one. And it says that he made them, speaking of the husband and the wife, he made them one because he seeks godly offspring, godly children, spiritual children. So if we're the children of God, he saw the human family, the way it's designed, as the best way to create that. And in order for him to take two and make them one, he had to make them two in the first place. So it even goes back to like making us male and female.
Sure.
God could have made us any way he wanted. We could have reproduced asexually. There are species that do that. We could have emerged out of a cabbage, like some weird sci-fi movie or something. Like he could have done that, but he made us male and female and brought us together in marriage because he saw that as the best vehicle to produce godly children or spiritual children. And so the human family is meant to model the spiritual family.
Okay.
The problem that I've experienced and that I've seen with some others too is that when the human family is not properly modeled, when the parents are actually human and fallible,
flawed, then
the child doesn't see the model that God would want them to see. So, I mean, for me, my father was not around after age 10. I didn't see him the last 10 years of his life. And I've realized as an adult too, that has also affected the way that I view God to some degree. I tended to be a fairly independent child, independent spirit type of, from a young age, but that experience kind of reinforced this. And I don't like to depend on other people. And I found that unwillingness to depend on other people has at times extended to God. I don't want to trust anyone. And so,
so let me break it in for just a second. So when you're saying your dad was gone and that affected how you look at God, do you think our dads, I think this is kind of what you're saying in terms of the human family is supposed to model the godly family.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at our dads, or maybe more applicable to this, when our kids look at us,
Mm-hmm.
are we supposed to be the image of God for them? Like not in
Yes.
a wrong, like idolatry way.
Yeah. And I mean, this is why there's a commandment that says, children, honor your parents, honor your father and mother.
Mhm.
It says in the book of Colossians that it says, children, obey your parents, for this is well pleasing to the Lord. So he does expect that. And I think that children learn to respect authority first from their parents.
Mhm.
And this teaches them to just be able to respect any authority in general.
And more
If they don't,
specifically, God as an authority.
and ultimately towards God. If they don't learn to show honor to their parents or show respect to their parents, and yes, parents need to model certain behaviors, but just
It should
focusing
be
on the children for
honorable
a
and
second. Yeah,
respectable.
right. But just focusing on the children for a second, if the children don't learn respect for and honor for their parents, we've seen examples, we've all seen these kinds of examples, and completely unruly, like that translates to later life. And socially, they tend to have more trouble respecting any kind of authority. If they didn't learn any kind of respect for parents, they're more likely to have other issues in terms of self-discipline, more likely to get into drugs and alcohol, more likely to end up in jail, more likely to end up below the poverty line. These are statistically things that are shown there. So being able to learn that behavior, I think, is important, and it puts the burden of responsibility on the parents to model that, knowing that this is an early seed of the respect that you want them to be able to show towards God as well. So I think that comes back to modeling the right behaviors, and just kind of connecting it back to like when it breaks down. If our parents, our human parents, maybe they were doing the best they could, maybe they did quite well, maybe they didn't do well, and
Right.
I mean, maybe they were downright wicked. I mean, that's the reality at times, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But in those cases, like if they didn't show affection, or they didn't show praise, or they had a short fuse and everybody had to tiptoe around them in the household, that can shape the way a person thinks. And they can learn from those experiences that they're responsible for other people's emotions, or that they need to take the blame for everything because the other person isn't going to. Or they could learn to distrust that if my parents didn't care for me, does anybody really care for me?
Right.
Can anybody actually be that genuine? And the reality is that God is that genuine. But if this is the worldview that we formed as children from our parents, it can be hard for us to really become convinced of that. Right. But to really understand that his love is truly unconditional, to believe that he's not impossible to please, that to believe that he's merciful, to believe that he even delights in us at times. It's, Zephaniah talks about how he will, speaking of Israel, he says, I will rejoice over them with singing. And that verse makes me think of like, leaning over the crib with one of my babies down, laying in the crib, playing, like singing to them or something. Like that's the kind of imagery that comes to mind when I read that verse. But I think if we can become fully convinced that God feels those things toward us as his children, then I think it becomes easier for us to trust him and to have faith in him.
Right.
And so those are the behaviors that I think we need to model for our children. We should not be impossible to please. Our love should not be conditional on their behavior.
Only I love you if you hit a home run.
Correct.
Or whatever.
Yeah. Love and affection are different from being pleased with behaviors.
Right.
And God shows his love unconditionally. He sent his son to die for us while we were yet sinners. So even while we were rebellious spiritual teenagers, so to speak, screaming back at him, I hate you.
Right.
he was still showing love. He also doesn't love us more when we're good, so
Right.
to speak. Like we don't, our behavior doesn't warrant favoritism or something
Right.
from him. He's not a
Earning his love. We
respecter
don't
of
earn his
persons.
love. Right.
So it's that our love and affection needs to be modeled in a way that is unconditional. And then when we're dealing with behaviors, like, yes, we need to correct certain behaviors along the way. But a good parent is also looking at a pattern too. Like it's not that one isolated incident means that, oh, your life is irrecoverable now because you made one mistake.
Right. There is no redemption for you.
Correct. And so being able to recognize the pattern, are they tending to come back to a good way of life over time? And is that tendency getting stronger over time?
Right.
Is how we would look at our children. But we need to model those behaviors and, give them praise when they do something well. Give them coaching and feedback when they need to improve in certain things. Of course, be merciful, show delight in them. Like don't withhold the fact that you are sometimes proud of them.
Right.
Okay,
so I heard you say a lot of good stuff in there. I'd like to see if we can turn into like a list of actionables for dads. I don't know if that's possible. We'll try. I heard you say, love our kids unconditionally. I heard you say delight in our kids. So as dads, we should be delighting in our children. We should be correcting them when needed and coaching. And I think God does that for us. So I think we could definitely take that from there. Yeah, I think you said a fourth one, but be pleased. Like we can be pleased. Like sometimes I think you were saying sometimes it's hard to imagine God being pleased with us because in our minds we can have this kind of version of God where he's just constantly disappointed in our imperfection, so there are times we can please him. So do our kids feel like they can please us? And that's a curious kind of self-examination there. Like,
yeah.
I'd like to think my kids are committed. Okay, I'll be honest about something. I at home I don't laugh at my kids' jokes. They hate it. So if I laugh at a joke, it's almost kind of sad. But my kids will like tell each other, "I got dad to laugh today," which is awful because I love to laugh. It's not like I don't want to laugh, but there's something about like I don't give pity laughs. I don't give a laugh.
You got to work for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, I wonder if that is getting to this point. I wonder if my kids, I'll have to ask them if they feel like they get or if I delight in them. Because I love my kids. I think they're hilarious. I think they're super smart. I think they know that I love them, but I don't know if they know that I delight in them. So that's a really convicting thing to think.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you would take some of those concepts you talked about and could be advice for parents, for advice for dads?
So I'll just kind of gloss over the idea of giving instruction and correction. And I mean, that's something that it's not really the topic of focus today, but I mean, that would be present. So let's take that as a given for a moment.
Assume you're disciplining your kids and correcting. Sure.
Yeah. So assume that is in place and you're trying to teach them as best you can. Then I think making sure that love and affection are not expressed in a way that is conditional is important. That means it's not conditional on their behavior, that you don't love them any more or less, but specifically you don't show affection any more or less based on their behavior. So even when you're frustrated with their behavior, don't withhold affection.
Okay, so let's get real granular here. You give your kid a hug when I'll use baseball again because my boys are playing baseball right now. They get a hit, they come to the dugout, you give them a big hug because they got a hit. They strike out, you also give them a hug in the dugout. I know it's kind of very sportsy, but then at home, they spill a glass of milk. I know I hate spilled milk. I know that's like a saying, don't cry over spilled milk, but I hate spilled milk. I hate the smell of it. They knock over a glass of milk. I'm still giving my kids a hug. I'm like, we got to clean this up. I'm not mad at you.
Yep.
I'm sad that we spilled milk and it may stink
or
whatever, but you still give them a hug.
Right.
I think sometimes we can kind of blow up, particularly dads, maybe moms too. We kind of blow up at small things in the grand scheme of things. When we kind of take a step back, we say, that is not a big deal.
Yep.
in the moment it was like, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So is that kind of to your point?
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. I would say that that'll connect more to, like, I'd say the delight and being pleased with them
Okay.
as well. I would also just say, on the concept of unconditional love, another pitfall there is favoritism.
Mm-hmm.
Don't compare your children to each other in a way that is at all connected to your feeling toward them. It's fine to say, hey, different people have different strengths and weaknesses.
Sure.
You know, it's okay that your sister's better at this than you, like, or you're better at that, whatever. But don't play favorites with children. When you do that, you are teaching your children that they need to compete for love.
And that lesson is ultimately going to translate to God.
They are going to feel like they need to compete for love, and they're going to be they're going to be more likely to be jealous with their husband or wife because they're not sure whether it's there. Like, I need to compete for this, and maybe they're going to take an interest elsewhere, or maybe, whatever. So don't show favoritism with kids. I would say very strongly. But with coming back to what you were saying, though, on being pleased with them, or like, kids do stuff that irritates us. They make messes, they make noise. Like, there's things that are irritating to you as a human being.
Sure.
It takes a lot of discipline, and it's hard for all of us, but the way that we react to that, sometimes that can take over our mood.
As the father.
As the father or the mother.
Okay.
And because that can become the day-to-days, like, you're trying to keep the guardrails on the chaos.
Yep.
That can take over our mood for the day.
Yep.
And that's all that they see, is that mom was upset because I left a mess in the kitchen. Dad was upset because I was making too much noise while he was trying to work.
Yep.
And if that's what dominates their experience with us, we become someone who's impossible to please.
And if it's the reps, if every rep is, hey, shut up. Hey, be quiet. Hey, keep it down. If that's every time you're talking to them, then their whole perception of you is, man, he needs silence. Like, what's his deal? What's his deal with his ears? Or whatever.
And I think that it's, if that's all that, you're right, if that's all they're hearing, then that's the view that they come to adopt. I would say, though, that it's less about keeping a log of how many times you corrected them versus how many times you praised them.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about having the emotional discipline to not react in an uncontrolled way.
Right.
They're going to do things that irritate you. Lots of people are going to do things that irritate us.
Right.
It's developing the emotional discipline, though, to not just react to that, and develop the self-awareness to see the anger or whatever it is brewing up in you,
right.
Recognize why it's happening, and then choose to react in a different way. And I think that, because it's when we respond with uncontrolled emotions, that's what has the stronger impact on them. And that's what creates in us the tendency to then just be irritable throughout the day.
Right.
So
I couldn't help but think of that. I don't remember exactly. Maybe it's Timothy, where he's listing out, maybe in Titus, listing out kind of like the qualifications of the leaders. When he talks about outbursts of wrath, when I've read that before, I've been like, what does that exactly mean? But
you know what it means.
You just painted the picture, though. It really is this, like, it's brewing up, and then you didn't control it. You let it out. And according to those scriptures, that's like a disqualification for being the kind of person that God wants us to be.
Right.
And I see that as like qualification for leaders in the church, but I see that as like a resume for being a dad too. Like, if you have these outbursts of wrath, or you let that stuff brew up, you let it come out, you see the shock on your kid's face, and then what you're talking about, which I hadn't considered before, which is that now reset your mood for the day, and now your baseline is just irritated. Like, that is, I think that's really powerful. I'm gonna have to think about what that looks like in my life, because I'm not a yeller for the most part. I don't think I have a lot of outbursts of wrath, but there are those times when I don't have everything controlled, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna have to think about what that looks like in terms of reset. I hadn't considered the resetting, but I think it's pretty powerful. That's probably true. Mm. All right, well, we're coming to the end of this. Are there any other little nuance, little nuggets you want to pull out of that thinking
Hmm.
that might be helpful for dads?
We've covered quite a bit.
Yeah, we have.
I don't want to repeat myself. I don't know that I have anything else new to add right now. I'll add one thing. So, the only other thing that I would add is to try to diversify your children's parenting experience. What I mean by that is
Hold on.
we're all
Diversify your children parenting experience.
correct.
Okay.
So, and maybe that's not the best way to phrase this, but allow me to explain. The it, in our society now, it is more common that we move away from our parents and we become disconnected from extended family. I think that there's a certain benefit, though, to having some other adults in their life, because we're all human beings. We're all insufficient in specific ways
Mm-hmm.
as guardians or mentors or parents to our children. But if they have some grandparents or aunts or uncles or
Mm-hmm.
close friends or some teachers, if they're in an environment there, um, there's times where maybe the parents were not connecting quite right. But when I was 13, my uncle really understood what I was going through.
Mm.
And I think that has a little bit of a diversifying, a benefit of diversifying the child's experience, that they have some other people that they can go to in the occasions where maybe mom and dad are a little bit insufficient. Maybe you tend to lose your temper too much or whatever it might be.
Do you
It
have a calm adult in their life as well?
correct, and
Yeah.
it can balance things out a little bit. A little bit. Now, that isn't to go to the opposite extreme, because there has been a sentiment out there of it takes a village to raise a child, being expressed perhaps in a way of replacing the parents. That's not
Right.
what this is. The parents still bear primary responsibility, but it can also be good for the for them to be some other adults that
Mm-hmm.
can provide some different experiences for them. When our kids come to summer camps, even if we are there, we actually prefer to not be the counselor for their dorm,
Mm.
so that they can experience another adult kind of shepherding the dorm a little bit around for the week. Um, I think that gives them a good diversification of experience in that way.
I think
So,
this goes back to your idea of socialization as adults modeling the behavior. And if you and your wife are the only ones modeling the behavior, then the diversity of having another adult model some behavior. And then you can have a conversation with your kid and say, okay, so what was it like at camp? How did they handle this? And did you like that? Did you not like that? How was that similar or different than how we do
mm-hmm.
things? Is there something you saw that you really wish we did? Like, I
Yep.
mean, that having those conversations with the kids would probably be pretty useful too.
Because I think that I certainly had this experience, and maybe other people do as well. But when you move away from home, you start to realize perhaps a little bit more of like, oh, everybody doesn't do it the way my family did.
Right.
There's differences. Not every family reacts like this. Not
Mhm.
every family does this or that.
Right.
You start to see those things as well, and that kind of opens up your mind a little bit to perhaps improving in certain areas, or perhaps reinforcing certain things from your childhood as well. So just kind of in anticipation of that, as adults, I think it's good along the way that the children have a few other adults in the mix.
Yeah. That's a great piece of advice. All right. So thank you so much, Aaron, for the time we've been able to spend talking. There is one question I like to ask every dad. I think it's important that, as men, we have these kind of we can have these vivid memories with our fathers. My dad and my mom split when I was 4, so I have very few of those memories, but I do have some very vivid memories. And it's funny to me when I talk to guys and they tell me their memories. It's some are really poignant, some are very kind of like run of the mill, kind of a daily thing, but it's funny that that's the thing that stuck out to them. And I think as we think about these vivid memories with our dads, it helps us kind of reassess the value we put in sometimes the mundane, or like these things that could become like this could be a core vivid memory for my kid and I don't even know it. So I'm curious, do you have a vivid memory of your dad?
So The answer is yes. I think I mentioned that my father was not in my life after
Mhm.
age 10. So there's certainly some negative memories associated with that. Prior to that time, though, I would say the things that I remember the most was the time spent. Because up until that point, my dad was very involved and, he helped us with homework and he took us on bike rides and I'd help him garden outside. And, he and I would build model rockets together and go
Oh,
launch
cool.
those out in the field near our house. And he was into ham radio. He was an engineer and designed radios and equipment, various communications equipment. So that was kind of a hobby of his, but then he got me into it, and like I got my license to radio and learn Morse code and that kind of stuff.
Oh,
So
that's
like
cool.
what I remember was him spending a lot of time with me alongside with him and him teaching me
Mm.
different things. And like in aggregate, I mean, I could go through a lot of examples. I mean, I
Mhm.
rattled off a few, but in aggregate, that was the most vivid things was the time spent with him in that way. Um, which then gives me reason to self-reflect because it's easy to get busy and we've got
Mhm.
responsibilities and we've got jobs and we've got bills and we've got
Yep.
stress and we need to get dinner on the table tonight, then you completely lose track of that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why I'm here this week is just carving out some time to do something together
Yeah.
with them at a summer camp. So
Yeah. That's great, man. I hope every dad hearing that can kind of evaluate and say, am I taking time to work alongside my kid? Because a lot of times we'll give our kids chores. Hey, go do XYZ. And we're not doing it with them.
mm-hmm.
And I think, I don't know that our kids are going to remember. I remember sweeping the floor, but I think remembering sweeping the floor with your dad might be one of those things that they remember when they're 8,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think it's important to not let it just be work. I
Sure.
fall into this a lot because I'm very work oriented.
Right.
It's not just my job, but like work around the house. Like I always have something that needs to be done. And
Right.
that's what's tends to be on my mind. Um, there needs to be recreation in there too. I also remember going on canoe trips with my dad
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
we'd
Yeah.
canoe down the river and there needs to be things like that mixed in and not all of us are it doesn't come naturally to all of us to make that a priority at
Right.
times. So, but that needs to be mixed in as well. And I think it commented earlier that having the time spent with them increases the odds of creating some memories. It's not that every time it's going to be this raging success and
Right.
there's some life-changing moment for the child, but the more often you're doing these things alongside with them, whether it's working together or playing together, then your odds of creating those kinds of impactful moments or in aggregate creating something
Right. A
impactful
positive
is
sentiment. Yeah.
increased.
Yeah. I think that's a good reminder to be playful too. That's can be harder for some dads. Some dads, I think they play all the time
Hmm.
and they never work. Or like, I'm not.
I don't really know what that's like.
I think there are some guys who are like that. I think there are some guys who
There
all
have
they
to
do
be
is play.
some.
And I think that can be frustrating for their wives probably. But the other end of that spectrum isn't necessarily the best. Like always working, never having fun. In my case, laughing at my kids' jokes or whatever.
Hmm.
Well, also, okay, so we've covered a bunch of stuff. We talked about what kind of a classical education looks like and the parameters, or maybe the elements. Um, we talked a little bit about for you guys at that older age, maybe doing something hybrid, like a different thing, transitioning into a new method of homeschool education. We talked about the parents feeling capable of being the educator. We talked a
Mm-hmm.
little about socialization.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about some kind of heady topics of our relationship with God and how we view as fathers, how we view God as a father, and then how as we read the Bible, we can learn things about how God feels about us. And sometimes we don't believe it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
there, like he delights in us. Do we believe it? And then as fathers, how are we trying to model the same way God loves us? How are we modeling that for our kids? And I think that's super valuable for all of us. And even if you're not a Christian, and I think one of my interviews with someone else, I can't remember who I was talking to, he was making the point that even if you're not a quote unquote Christian, or even if you don't believe in the Bible or are religious, if you'll practice some of the things that are in the Bible, you'll see a beneficial result, regardless of the faith element. Like you remove faith from it, you just do it, you still see the benefits, even from like a secular point of view. So if you're watching this, if you made it this far and you are not a Christian, you don't believe in God, you don't read the Bible, congratulations for sticking through it. Aaron must have been really captivating. Um, but yeah, try some of these things and see if they have a positive impact on your family. But yeah, so we've covered a lot. That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
For sure.
All right, homeschool dads, you and your family, go learn something awesome today.